Welcome to another edition of the Horseman Pro Football Talk podcast. This is our Week 9 recap, and I'm Brad.
This is Zach.
And I'm Hefe.
All right, we definitely want to thank you for listening, watching, whatever the case may be. Please be sure to show us some love, like, share, and subscribe. Word is getting out. We're picking up new followers. We certainly appreciate it. Please continue to help us do that. Tell all your friends. Every little bit helps. We certainly appreciate the support. So we're switching up the format a little bit to bring you what we think is important. We passed the halfway point. The playoff picture is starting to take shape, and we're going to start concentrating on those playoff teams and run down instead of run down game by game. We're going to go through the playoff pictures as they present themselves in the order they present themselves and talk about the game. So the first up, pretty remarkable. Hefe, I know you don't want to hear this, but I probably should have told you to bring earplugs. The Pittsburgh Steelers have started 8-0 for the first time in franchise history. It's pretty remarkable.
That it is.
For all the success they've had over generations, I definitely would have assumed they'd done that before.
Yeah, I read that this morning. So they had a little bit of a scare yesterday, but I think at 8-0 you're going to have some scares. You're going to have some games come up that you're just not playing well. Things are going to happen. And I didn't watch this game, so I don't know. But they were able to pull out the victory against Dallas, which is, obviously contributed to their 8-0 record. I was surprised it was this close to an extent, but the sun shines on a dog's ass every once in a while, right?
Yeah. And, this Garrett Gilbert guy, there was a little bit of hype around him. The last anybody saw of him, he was in the AAF and he was lighting it up, going to be the MVP there if the third season finished. And so there was a little bit of, we know what this guy is capable of, but can he do it in the NFL? And he had a pretty good day against a really good defense. We know all the weapons that are in place on that offense. It's just a matter of getting a good guy behind the center. And the offensive line over the last couple of weeks has gotten a little healthier. Obviously, Zach Martin being a big part of that. He's back in the lineup. So, it's getting a little better. It got a little out of hand there for a little while, but they can keep getting healthier. They might be able to pull out this division. On the Steelers end of things, I saw a lot of Steelers fans on Twitter and on Instagram talking about how the Steelers seem to always play down to their competition. So, I don't pay attention to the Steelers enough to know if that's the case. But yeah, I'm going to imagine that if all the Steelers fans are saying that it's something that they're afraid of when they play bad teams, then I'm just going to take it for fact. So, maybe, all the games like this are closer than they should, but still come away with a W. So you can't argue if you're a Steelers fan.
Yeah, for sure. And this game was it was a surprise to me. I would have assumed that the Steelers would have came out with a very easy win. But Dallas still put up a good fight with it. Luckily for the Steelers, even though that they're still the only undefeated team left in the NFL, they have a 2-game lead on the Baltimore Ravens in the AFC North. But they have 4 division games left with 2 notable games against playoff contenders. So they play Cincinnati in Week 10. They're at Cincinnati in Week 15. They're at Cleveland in Week 17. And they also face Baltimore again in Week 12. But they also have to go to Buffalo and play the Colts. So they have 6 games that they're going to have to get through in order to lock up this division. But like I said, they have a 2-game lead. I think the Ravens have 3 division games and 1 notable game, but we'll get to that later. So that 2-game lead is going to help them out a lot. I think Steelers are going to come out on top the AFC North, and I still think that they're probably going to end up with the number 1 seed unless they stumble in a couple of those games. Kansas City might jump up there, but they're definitely number 1, number 2 as of right now, in my opinion.
I have to agree. I also have to say that with their division, with the way Baltimore is not, I think we can all agree right now they're not living up to their potential. The thing about the Steelers right now is I can't really put my finger on it, right? If we're talking about the Buccaneers, talking about their offensive weapons, you talk about the Saints, you got Sean Payton and Drew Brees, and I know there's a lot of other players involved, but just the core things you can put your finger on. And the Steelers right now, other than playing well together and playing unselfishly and just flat out smashing your head in. I can't really put my finger on anything. Hefe may be able to break that down a little bit more, but with what they've done so far, which surprises me, I didn't expect this to happen. With as down as Baltimore is, not realizing their potential, which I talked about that last week. I thought they did a good job against Indianapolis. I still don't think they've completely broken out of what they're capable of, and they could do that at any moment. They could not do it, but they could do that at any moment. And doing it right before the playoffs is a really good time to pop off with that. Looking at how weak their division is, other than that, with Cincinnati and Cleveland, and then looking at how sporadic Buffalo's been, and even more sporadic how Indianapolis has been. Dare I bring up 16-0?
I mean, it's entirely possible they could, but we know how hard that is. So I think
look at the look on Hefe's face. He's got something to say about that. Let's hear it.
I wish we could cut over to him. Go ahead, Hefe. Let's hear what you got to say.
Yeah, no, there's no shot. Up the first half of their schedule, they had a top 10 easiest schedule in the league. This back half is kind of like the Colts. It's super heavy loaded. They're going to have to play some tough games, like Zach was saying. So there's no shot that they come out of this 16-0. And I it just, yeah, no, I don't even want to think about that. It's not going to happen.
Well, fair enough. But in all ridiculous, I mean, look, if the Patriots couldn't finish the season undefeated a few years ago, and no one else has been able to do it since the Miami Dolphins, it's just incredibly hard to do. And I don't see that this team has what it takes to do that, but I didn't see that they had it to go 8-0. And I have to at least give them that. But this is the kind, in this conversation, case in point, it'll be somebody like Cincinnati that will beat them. That's what'll happen. It comes out of left field. You have no idea where it came from, and it took everybody by surprise. But it's certainly fun to talk about, and I agree with you. They've got a strong 2-game lead. I think they're going to take this division. Now, as of right now, not only taking the division, but with their record, I want to remind everyone there was a format change in the playoffs, and God, every time I say that word, I just keep hearing Jim Moore. Playoffs. Are you kidding me? Playoffs? There's only one bye in each division or in each conference, and right now the Steelers are sitting in number 1, and they will get the only bye. So number 2 is the Kansas City Chiefs, who are 8-1 at the top of their division. They're 2-1 in their division, and they had a scare yesterday. Yeah, I'd like to hear Hefe. Hefe's big on the Panthers, and you talked about that. Talk about it some more.
Yeah, I really thought they were going to pull this one out. The field goal late was just a little too far out, and he pushed it. But they definitely had a chance in this one. And I was thinking about it yesterday after that game was over, and there's some guys, a lot of guys in the league that are playmakers, and there's a couple guys that are game changers. And Christian McCaffrey is a game changer. He came first game back after what he just missed 7 weeks, 7 or 8 games. And his first game back, and he has 10 catches, a touchdown. He had 69 rushing yards onto it. And it was like he was never even gone. And he adds obviously a whole different element to the Panthers. And even though they were able to rattle off a few wins with Mike Davis, once teams figured out the things that Mike Davis can do, he was limited to that point when people weren't letting him do those things. So with Christian McCaffrey back, it opens that offense up. And Robbie Anderson has been one of the better pickups from the offseason, and he's kind of turned into their number 1. So they were able to put up a fight against, like you guys were saying, this is the Chiefs. They got the most firepower in the league. They can trample anybody anytime they want. But the Panthers did a really good job of sticking in this game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if Mahomes just wasn't on his plays like he always does, I mean, he 30 for 45, 372 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, he was a former MVP and Super Bowl MVP for a reason. If he wasn't playing like he did, then Carolina definitely could have won this game. But looking forward to Kansas City here. They have a 2.5 game lead over Las Vegas in the AFC West. I don't think Vegas is going to be able to catch him. Like I've said in our pick show, I'm going to take Kansas City almost every single week We'll see if I take them in week 12 against Tampa Bay or week 15 against New Orleans. That just depends on how those teams are playing, how everybody's momentum's rolling. But they play Las Vegas again at Las Vegas in week 11. They also have to play Denver in week 13, the Chargers in week 17, which I'm sure the Chiefs will be resting players that game. But like I said, they play at Tampa Bay week 12, at Miami week 14, and at New Orleans week 15. So they might drop a couple games here. Personally, I don't see it happening. I think they'll actually overtake the Steelers when push comes to shove to be the number one overall seed in the AFC conference. But they do have a pretty tough schedule with those 3 away games towards the back end of the season.
Yeah, and so there's a couple scenarios developing here. One is obviously the fight with, as it appears right now, with the Steelers for the bye week. The other 2 divisions, I think, are going to be a little more competitive, and they're not going to be able to catch these 2. So it's going to come down the stretch, like you said. For Vegas, I don't want to get too far ahead. We're getting ready to talk about the Raiders. This division is going to come down to that. Not only the stretch games that they have against the teams that you just mentioned, and we'll talk about the Raiders in a second, their games, but the Raiders are going to have to beat the Chiefs.
Yeah, absolutely. If they want any chance, they're going to have to beat the Chiefs.
That's exactly right.
I mean, they beat them once, but
and just because they beat them doesn't mean they're going to win the division. I mean, they're behind enough that it could not work out that way. But I think any reasonable chance of the Raiders taking the division, they're going to have to beat the Chiefs. And they play in week 11. Is that what we said? 2 weeks?
Yeah, they're in Vegas week 11.
Okay. So that'll be a big game for us to watch for sure. All right. Sitting currently in the number 3 spot in the AFC is the Buffalo Bills at 7-2, top the AFC East. Let's again, I'm going to hand this one off to Hefe. He's big on the Bills. The Bills have struggled last couple of weeks, and we busted their balls a little bit. And I want Hefe to get a chance to kind of stretch his neck out, stick his chest out, and praise Josh Allen a little bit.
Yeah, definitely praising Josh Allen here because, over the last couple of weeks, I've talked about how they either need to go to Zach Moss as a lead back or they need to just go back to letting Josh Allen rip it all game. There was one point in this game when the play to run ratio for the Bills was 35 passes to 5 runs. And then they had scored like 34 points up to that point, and they were absolutely on top of the Seahawks, just couldn't do anything wrong. But I think a big thing for the Bills here was getting Matt Milano back. He seems to just be the heart and soul of that defense. It was like as soon as he got back, everybody was in the right place, doing the right thing. So, I think him being out for a couple games, made things look worse than it should have with the defense. This is a good defense. They just didn't have their centerpiece. They didn't have their captain there. But with him back in that defense, it's totally different identity. They came out, and Russell Wilson was obviously the MVP front runner coming into this game, and he threw 3 interceptions again. And the Bills were just playing really good defense. And if they keep going to Zach Moss had more carries than anybody else on the team in this one, so they keep doing that. Maybe run a little bit more. I don't know about going 35-5 every game is probably not a good idea. But keep leaning on Zach Moss. I think that's the way to go. And Josh Allen, just let him, give him the time. I think that's the important thing is he needs time to throw. So as long as that offensive line can stay healthy, they need Mitch Morse to come back. That'll be another big addition when he's able to get back in the lineup. But the Bills looked really strong yesterday, and I think that's how they look the rest of the season.
Yeah, for sure. And to me, this was a really big game for Buffalo. It may not seem like it on the outside, but what I'm getting ready to say, it makes it that much more important that they got this win over Seattle right here because now they are 7-2. They're 4-0 in the division, 5-2 in the conference. They only have 2 divisional games left. One is against Miami week 17. The other one is at New England. So if they could pull both of those off, the only other playoff team that they have to face for the rest of their schedule is against Pittsburgh in week 14. So if you're a Buffalo Bills fan right now, I would be extremely happy with your squad because they're sitting there at 7-2. They have 3 notable games to play left on this schedule. They could coast through, and who knows what will happen up top. The Steelers and the Chiefs might lose a couple of those games, and the Bills might be your number 1 team.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking about that too because I think with the Bills and the Steelers playing, like Brad said, the Steelers, that Bengals game for the Steelers worries me. The Bengals are a threat for anybody right now. They just got to be able to pull it together at the end of games. So if they lose that one and then they lose to the Bills, and the Bills can just rattle off the rest of their schedule, they have a tough sledding too. But as long as they can finish off their schedule strong, and the Steelers lose a couple down the stretch, but they can beat the Steelers. Bills are right there, and I think it's going to happen.
And the Chiefs. I mean, Zach just laid out that the Chiefs have division games against the Chargers and Denver. We all know where that could go. They'll probably win those, but any one of those games they could lose. One of two of those games just because it's interdivision. But then they have Tampa Bay, Miami, and New Orleans as well. So their odds, both these teams have better odds of losing down the stretch than the Bills do. And as far as the division's concerned, Miami, if they had an extra 4 games in this season, Miami could overtake this division. But with the way the cards are dealt right now and laid out, Miami still has a struggle. They have a tougher schedule than Buffalo does, and they're a game and a half behind. So they have a huge, steep hill to climb. And so I agree with both of you. Buffalo is sitting in a really, really good spot, maybe the best spot in the AFC right now.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah. So, all right, number 4, fourth spot right now, currently at the top of the AFC South. As much as it pains me to say that, the Tennessee Titans, kind of. I mean, all jokes aside, I'm a Colts fan, but we have consistently talked about that we like what Vrabel's doing, we like what Tannehill's doing, and how could you not like Henry? I mean, just watching that guy run. So they won a pretty. I was mildly impressed yesterday. That Bears defense makes things look ugly, and they make you look stupid. I mean, we say all we want about the Bears offense, but the Bears defense is for real. And Tennessee was able to grind that out. They're 6-2 at the top of their division. How many games ahead are they of Indianapolis? One game?
Yeah, just one.
Yeah, I'll let you guys hop in here before I give my final thoughts.
Yeah, the Titans, as a Colts fan with an upcoming matchup with them, it's rivalry week, so not a whole lot of love coming from me this week, but you got to give them props. They were up 24-0 at some point. A lot of what the Bears did was in garbage time, but the Titans, 24 points looks a little misleading. It was a couple errors deep down the field and one really good play by AJ Brown that kind of let him pull away. And Derrick Henry wasn't able to get a whole lot going until it was like run the clock out time. He kind of got his stats up a little bit. Ryan Tannehill under 50% completion in this game. And so it was a tough, grinded out game. Obviously, Desmond King, first game with the Titans, he was able to pick up a fumble and score. And I'm sure he had a hand in limiting what the Bears could do. But, I don't think anybody expected the Bears offense to come into this game and do anything that surprises you. They just looked really bad. I think I have more questions about Bears and Titans after this one. The Titans, I want to see them play a better offense now that they have Desmond King and see like how that actually affects it. And they released Vic Beasley and a couple of other guys, so maybe the guys that they had behind them can be better for me. I just want to see them against a better offense before I give them too much props.
Yeah, so I was really hoping that Chicago could pull this one out against Tennessee because with the Colts losing to Baltimore, Tennessee winning this game, like we said, they're one game ahead of Indianapolis in the AFC South. The problem here, and it kind of worries me being a Colts fan, is that between the Titans and the Colts, out of all the teams we're going to discuss today, these two teams have the hardest schedule down the stretch. Tennessee, they're going to play each other twice. You got against Indianapolis, week 10, and then at Indianapolis, week 12.
This Thursday. I mean, it's coming. It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, for sure. So these are two huge games. If one team is able to sweep these two games, more than likely they're going to come out on top of the division. If they split, it's going to come down to the rest of the divisional games and the notable games that we're going to list here too. But with Tennessee, like I said, they play Indianapolis twice. They play at Jacksonville week 14, and then they're at Houston week 17. but they also have to play at Baltimore week 11, against Cleveland week 13, and at Green Bay week 16. And then we'll get to the Colts here in a little bit. But between these two teams, I'm beginning to think that you have to win the division to make the playoffs, because with as hard of a back end schedule as the Titans and the Colts have, if you're not going to come out on top of the division, you may not make the playoffs.
I have to agree with you. I mean, the Titans are at 6-2, and they're sitting right there with. And we're getting ready to get in this, but the Ravens are 6-2. The Raiders are 5-3. The Dolphins are 5-3. The Browns are 5-3. The Colts are 5-3. It's your point is well taken. This is where we really start separating the men from the boys, and I don't know which team it's going to be, but looking down the schedule, I'm afraid it's not going to be the one that we want. They've got some things they need to shore up, but I think the Titans and the Colts are, and we're getting ready to find out Thursday. I think they're pretty evenly matched, and so luck is going to play a part in this. I wish
Andrew.
I wish Andrew Luck was going to play a part in it. I think right now the Titans have the upper hand in this with their schedule and with the offensively the way they're playing. So we'll certainly see this shake out. Which brings us now. Those are the 4 divisional spots. Now we're looking at the remaining 4 provisional spots, and sitting currently in the 5th spot is the Baltimore Ravens at 6-2, and they are a game and a half. Is that 2 games? Is that what we said?
2 games. Yeah, they're 2 games behind Pittsburgh in the AFC North.
Yeah, so the offense looked a little better yesterday against a really tough defense, the Colts defense, but they still put up 24 points. It was a good defensive battle until the second half, and I really don't have much to say about that. Either you two want to comment on the game yesterday?
I mean, yeah, I think the defense overall played outstanding for 4 quarters. I know they couldn't really get off the field, but they held the Ravens for an entire game. They held the Ravens to 260 yards and 4.2 yards per play. 4.2 yards per play against any team. If your defense is doing that, should be good enough to win, and it just wasn't. The Ravens made all the adjustments they needed to. They had 18 rushing yards, averaging 178 coming into this game. They had 18 rushing yards in the first half. And so going into halftime, when it should have been 10-0. Jonathan Taylor fumbles the ball, and Chuck Clark strips the ball and makes a play and picks it up and takes it for a touchdown, and so it's 10-7 at halftime, and they made all the right adjustments, and they got the running game going, and it seemed like they were running the option every play, and it was working. They came out, he was optioning into a pass, and then they started to run the option pretty much every play, and Lamar was keeping it. And then there was a crucial 4th down where everybody in the building, even I thought, sitting here watching the game, I thought for sure Lamar's just going to take this one. He's taken like the last 6. And we didn't have anybody on the edge, setting the edge, and he handed it to the running back and got that. So defense just couldn't get off the field. But I think they played well. The offense for the Colts was the issue in this one. But to stay on the Ravens, just impressive to be able to grind out a win. They had never won in Indianapolis. They had, I believe, never won a road game when being down by 10 points. I think that was the stat that they were saying in the game. So, good job by them to rebound. But, they got a pretty tough schedule ahead of them too. So they're going to have to win some key games down the stretch.
Well, like you said, this was a good defensive battle. They made the adjustments in the second half, absolutely capitalized on the Colts' mistakes, and they got the win for it. They put up 17 points, took the lead, and won it 24-10. Moves them to 6-2. Like we said, they're 2 games behind Pittsburgh in the AFC North. They lost that first game against Pittsburgh 24-28 back in Week 8, but they're going to Pittsburgh in Week 12, which will be another huge game. They want any chance of salvaging this divisional title. They need to win that game there. Then they also go to Cleveland Week 14 and go to Cincinnati in Week 17. You would think the Ravens would be able to get it done, but like you said, it's a divisional game, so anything can happen. But then the only other notable game against like a playoff caliber team would be versus Tennessee Week 11. So I don't think the rest of the Ravens schedule is too difficult. I think they're actually sitting in a very good position. I would almost for sure give them a lock to be in the playoffs at this point. And who knows, they may end up, if the Steelers stumble, they may slide in there and take the divisional crown.
Which is possible. The Steelers could be overachieving, which might be why we didn't expect them to be here. I mean, and I don't want to curse them with that. I don't want to say that's the case, but it certainly is possible at this point. And we're still waiting for the Ravens to break out and be what we think the Ravens are capable of being. I want to touch on on Hefe's point. I know at one point I never did hear the final statistics on the second quarter, but at one point in the quarter yesterday, the Ravens had run 20 plays, and the Colts had run one.
Oh yeah, they're in the third quarter. The Colts only were able to get 4 plays, and that's what I was talking about, the defense not being able to get off the field. We saw that in the Browns game too. In the second half of that game, they were just, or in the first half of that game, they were just able to keep the offense off the field. Even though they weren't getting huge plays, defense just was never really able to get off the field.
And there's an irony to coaching football that the best way to beat a good defense is to keep them on the field. The longer you can keep them on the field, no matter how good they are, obviously they become tired, and that appears to be what happened in the second half yesterday. So kudos to John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens for a big win.
All right, does anybody know the time of possession numbers?
Yes. It was 30. The Ravens had 33 minutes and 26 seconds. The Colts had 26 minutes and 34 seconds.
It's closer than I thought. But.
Yeah, it's closer than I thought. But I think at that point, it was critical. That third quarter that Hefe we just mentioned was the critical point that really turned the game.
Yeah, for sure.
And that includes the last 2 drives that resulted in nothing from the Colts standpoint. So when you take those minutes away, there's probably 7 or 8 minutes right there that completely puts it out of whack. So, all right, 6th spot. We're looking at the Las Vegas Raiders. We talked a little bit about this. They're sitting at 5-3. They beat the Chargers, which is a good interdivisional game. Not the Chargers are that. Well, what I kept saying about Miami last year, they're one of the best of the worst in the league. They have the potential to beat someone. They just haven't found their identity. They haven't put it all together yet. So a big win for the Raiders, especially interdivision. And the Raiders are making a strong case for the playoffs here.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw earlier when I was looking at the standings and seeing where everybody was after Sunday that in the AFC, the Raiders have had the hardest schedule so far, the toughest strength of schedule, but they've also had the best strength of victory. So they're winning games that people think they shouldn't be winning. They've had a tough schedule. So I think, now that people are getting healthy again, they've gotten some linemen back, as long as, they don't have any COVID protocol stuff that kind of derails the game like it did a week or 2 ago, whenever that was, then I think they'll be just fine, which is kind of tough because, like we were saying with the Colts, we hope the Colts are able to get in. But I think, the Ravens, like we just talked about, are for sure getting in the playoffs. And the Raiders, to me, are basically a lock to get in the playoffs. They've made it through a tough stretch of their schedule, and they have some tough games left. But I think they can come out of the other side with a winning record and make the playoffs.
Yeah, it's very possible. Right now they're holding a tiebreaker over Cleveland, Indianapolis, and Miami based off of win percentage in conference games. I think they play one more NFC team the rest of the way. But like we said, they're 2.5 games behind Kansas City in the AFC West. They beat Kansas City once, 40-32 back in Week 5. They have to play them again at home back here in Week 11. They also have divisional games against Denver in Week 10, the Chargers in Week 15, and then they're at Denver again in Week 17. So if they could win 2-3 of those, they're sitting pretty. They also have to play Indianapolis Week 14 and Miami Week 16. So they have some games up here that got to get done, but they're more than capable of winning any one of those games, if you ask me. So it'll be interesting. Out of the rest of the teams in the AFC we're going to talk about, with the exception of the Colts, they have one of the hardest back-end schedules here, but it's not too hard as long as they can win their divisional games.
Yeah, and I'm going to get a little ahead of myself here with some of the teams we have left to talk about, but I think that Hefe brings up a really, really good point. If we had to take the first five are gone, right? The first five are gone. The Chiefs are going to probably win their division. Pittsburgh or Baltimore is going to win their division. The Bills are probably going to win their division, and the Titans or the Colts are going to win their division. All right, so the first five spots are gone. We're talking about the last three. In the last three spots, we have the Raiders, the Dolphins, the Browns, and the Colts. All right, my money is on the Raiders and the Dolphins. As it stands right now, that is where, with all things being considered, strength of schedule left, the way people are playing, problems that need to be sorted out, that's where my money lies on both those two teams. Ironically, they play each other, and we'll see what comes out of that. But so, and that's for spot 6 and 7. So spot 8 is going to come down between the Browns and the Colts or the Titans. So I think it's a pretty safe. I think that's a good point, Hefe. I think there's a pretty safe bet that the Raiders are probably going, unless their season completely falls apart at the seams, they're probably going to make the playoffs. Which leads us to the number 7 spot right now, the Miami Dolphins. They are probably also going to find themselves in the playoffs. They're at 5-3. They had a scare yesterday against Arizona, which, they still hung on and they won at Arizona. They were at Arizona, right? So the Dolphins are really, again, just like the Raiders, making a case for the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, in this game, you knew that we were going to have to see what Tua could do. His first start, they didn't really need him to do much. The offense doesn't really get anything going against the Rams because they didn't need to. But in this game, this was a back and forth, one of the most fun games to watch of the weekend. Him and Kyler going back and forth was so great. And Tua ends up 20 of 28 for 248 and 2 touchdowns. And that's exactly what you want to see on a day where they don't have Myles Gaskin or Matt Breida, their top 2 running backs. They used a couple of guys that I hadn't even heard of before. And obviously Jordan Howard getting back in action, but they didn't really do anything. So it's cool to see that the passing offense could be effective with Tua in there. He was careful with the ball. The first half, there were some things that were a little cringy when he was getting pressured or getting hurried. But it seemed like somebody talked to him at halftime and he settled down because he wasn't making those mistakes. And we saw him roll out a couple times instead of trying to make a pass that he couldn't make, and force something that he couldn't get in there. So there's already, little pieces of growth. And if we can see that every week with as strong as his defense is, he should have a decent chance to win every game, no matter who they're playing. So, we'll have to see what the injury is with Preston Williams. That might be an injury that costs him down the line. But from what I saw yesterday, it looks good. Like you said, it looks good for the Dolphins' chances of getting in the playoffs.
Yeah, I have to agree with you guys. Tua looked a lot better than he did last week, that's for sure. And they went into Arizona in the desert, came out with 34-31 win. That moves them to 5-3, like we said. They have a tiebreaker over Cleveland based off the strength of victory, and a tiebreaker over Indianapolis based on best win percentage and conference games. They're 1.5 games behind Buffalo in the AFC East. Like we talked about earlier, Buffalo's sitting in a really good spot. It's going to be very difficult for Miami to catch them, although it is entirely possible they can. They're playing in Buffalo in Week 17. Buffalo might rest their starters in, depending on how all this goes. So they could potentially pull that game out. They play at New York against the Jets in Week 12. It's the Jets. They should win that one. And then they're at home against New England Week 15. So they're more than capable of winning any one of those games there. The 2 games that I have marked here that are very important for Miami is Week 14 against Kansas City and Week 16 against Las Vegas. If they can win 1 or 2 of those games, they have a real shot of going into Week 17 against Buffalo, making them not rest their starters and having a big duel in what's sure to be a freezing, wintry wonderland up there in Buffalo in Week 17.
Which gives Buffalo the advantage. So not only does Buffalo really have only one tough game. I mean, every game's tough. I don't mean to discount any game in the NFL, but they have Pittsburgh. And then, as you just said, Miami has mean, they've got KC and Vegas. They're going to have to win at least one of those two games to be in contention, and then they're going to have to beat Buffalo in the freezing cold. So that's why we said earlier Buffalo probably is sitting in a better position. But with the way this defense is playing and getting better, the entire team's getting better. And what I saw from Tua yesterday, Tua looked good, guys. He looked damn good. And watching that left-handed rollout, holy shit! They made a big deal. Said the Cardinals didn't have anybody. They didn't have a left-handed quarterback to simulate anything in practice. They can't get ready for him. Anyway, all right. So the two contingency spots, the two teams that, we were just talking about playoff spots, but we feel compelled to talk about the two teams on the outside looking in. That's the Cleveland Browns and the Indianapolis Colts. I misspoke a minute ago when I said there are eight playoff spots. There's only seven. Miami right now sits in the seventh spot. We've got Cleveland, which would currently be in what we consider eighth, and Indianapolis in the ninth spot. They're both at 5-3. Cleveland has the tiebreaker because of the win. So that doesn't bode well. Indianapolis is probably at this point going to have to win their division to get in because of what we just talked about with Vegas and Miami. And because I think the Browns, personally, I don't see the Browns in the division they're in with Baltimore and Pittsburgh. I mean, and they've still got Tennessee on the schedule, but I don't see them being a legit contender. And again, with the Colts, I know they're sitting in the ninth spot. We can kind of talk about these teams together. The Colts are going to have to win their division, or they're probably going to be on the outside looking in.
Yeah, that's a fear I have. But as an optimistic fan, I'm hoping. I look at what the Saints did, and they were able to win. Obviously, Phillip Rivers isn't Drew Brees, different situations. But with Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders out, they had to find guys that could make plays for him and that worked in the offense. And I thought Ashton Doolin was going to be somebody that could sub in for Paris Campbell and kind of take over that role. Now he's on the IR. And now we have this other guy, Carmichael. I can't even remember his name. Some guy from the Colts practice squad that they drafted this year. I believe he's a rookie, and they put him in because Ty is out, and we need to find playmakers, right? And I'm hoping that the Colts can do what the Saints have been able to do, and they take a couple of hard losses, but over the hard losses, they are able to find people that work for them. So when they get the guys back healthy, even though Ty hasn't been Ty, having the threat of Ty on the field makes a difference. And I think we really saw that this past week. Phillip wasn't able to get going like he had in the past couple of games. And so I think just getting Ty back on the field to help, but also Michael Pittman was able to take reps as the number one receiver. So, whether he takes more of that role this year or happens next year, I think there are good things happening. That it's just unfortunate that it's week 8 and they're trying to find guys that can make plays for them offensively, with all the injuries that have happened, and hopefully they can figure it out, make it in the playoffs, and then we can get Paris Campbell back. I'm not 100% sure if Paris Campbell's going to be able to come back, but there has been talk about him coming back if we're able to make the playoffs. So, that's what I'm really holding out for. I think Paris Campbell is a really good playmaker and can help this team, but they got to get there first,
Yeah, so the thing with the Browns and the Colts, like we said, the Colts, if they're going to want to get in this playoffs, they absolutely have to win the AFC South. And I said earlier when I was talking about the Titans, the Colts have the hardest back-end schedule in the AFC, probably in the entire league. They're one game behind Tennessee. They have to make that up. Cleveland has a tiebreaker due to the head-to-head. They have to make that up. We played Tennessee twice, at Tennessee week 10 versus Tennessee week 12. We also go to Houston week 13. We're against Houston week 15 in Indianapolis and against Jacksonville week 17. But then the Colts also have to play Green Bay week 11, Las Vegas week 14, and at Pittsburgh week 16. So a lot of games in there that they have to win, and they have, like we said, they just absolutely have to win the AFC South. As far as the Browns, I'm almost ready to write the Browns off making the playoffs, to be honest with you. They're on the outside looking in, but I don't think it's going to get any better for them. They still have to play Baltimore and Pittsburgh again, and then at Tennessee. They could squeeze in there in the 7th spot, but with the teams ahead of them, like Miami and Las Vegas, I don't see the Browns getting in at all because they're obviously not going to win their division.
Yeah, I think, and I think we can all agree on this, that the 7 spots are secure. The only real question is going to be who's going to get the bye and who's going to win the AFC South. Other than that, I don't think there's any other conversation in the AFC South playoff picture, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay. We want to remind you it's not too late to go head-to-head against us in weekly pick-em battle, especially because one of us made their picks on the show and forgot to fill them in. I didn't go back and calculate. I don't even know that I will at this point. Doesn't matter. Anyway, if you're interested in, I'm not going to win the whole thing. I didn't fill my picks out, so come and play with us anyway.
You act like you were going to win it anyways.
I'm sorry. Can somebody mute him, please? Anyway, come join us. Hop on our Facebook, Twitter page at Horseman Sports, where you can find the link to join our free Pigskin Pick'em League and possibly win a prize and maybe get on air with us and represent your team. So also every Wednesday, check out Hefe's new power rankings. You can find it on Facebook and Twitter page at Horseman Sports. Be sure to check that out and let us know in the comments what you think about your favorite team's ranking. Tell Hefe whether you think he's a god or he's trash. He loves that kind of feedback. If you are into fantasy football, which I know many of you are, check out our weekly episode of Fantasy Central, where Zach and Hefe cover the week's top waiver wire picks, must-starts, and players to avoid in the upcoming week. And, of course, we will see you back here on Thursday for this week's Game Picks and Preview Show. Until then, thanks for joining us. Enjoy the games, and see you Thursday.